This week we're joined by Shay Lally from Houses to Restore, the man behind some of Ireland's most impressive renovation projects. From full home transformations to church restorations and sensory rooms and schools, Shay is managing serious projects at scale, but his journey didn't start in construction. It started playing percussion with the RTÉ Concert Orchestra before moving into quantity surveying. We talk renovations, pricing, pressure, growth, and how he built a community of over 75,000 people along the way. This episode is brought to you by Top Drawer Talent, the supply chain procurement recruitment specialist, and Nesta Storage, Dublin's #1 self-storage provider. You can get 25% off your first month storage using code CS25. Let's get into it. Here we go.
But Shay, was the plan always to be a QS?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So when I completed my CAO form, I initially wanted to study music, and I did have a desire to want to be a QS, funnily enough. So on my CAO form, when the crunch came, I think it's the 1st of July, I had the two things in my head, and I was having such a debate with myself. So I decided that I'd study music first, and I'd put the QS on the back burner, because I was doing a lot of gigging at the time as a drummer and a percussion player, and I felt like if I went and I studied QS, like it was a pretty intense course, that I'd have to kind of put a stop to all of that. So I kind of felt like when I was younger, it was a good time to pursue all that stuff. And then I kind of thought, you know what, I can revisit the QS, and in a couple of years' time, that will always be there. But I wasn't really sure if the opportunities drumming-wise would always be there had I've stopped it and then tried to maybe get back into it in a couple of years' time.
Okay. And what does a quantity surveyor actually do?
So it's a funny job because a lot of people think it involves doing building surveys, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
There's two sides to QS, and you can have a contractor's QS and you can have a PQS. So a PQS is on the client side and the contractor's QS is on the contractor side. So a contractor side will look after the contractor's interests, PQS will look after the client's interests. Typically a PQS will put a bill of quantities together which quantifies all of the work that has to be done on site, and then they'll put that out to tender to various different contractors. The contractor's QS will price all that up, they'll check all the measurements, they'll make sure there's no gaps in any of the information, they'll submit their tender. The PQS will review the various different tender returns, and then they'll appoint the most competitive, or it's the contractor they deem to be the most suited to deliver the project.
Okay.
So you kind of have the two sides of it, and then the contractor's QS, as the job goes on, will put things forward like payment claims, additional items, variations, all the extras basically, and they'll put all them to the PQS for approval, and the PQS will assess them. And then the PQS will basically give the contractor's QS the nod to say, that's fine, plow ahead with those various different things, or here's your payment cert and expect that money next week or whatever. And then the PQS and the CQS, the PQS and the CQS will come together then basically at the end and agree the final account. But if everything's done correctly all the way along, like with interim payments, all of the variations and all that sort of stuff is all agreed as you go along, the final account should be very transparent and very straightforward. It's only if things are done badly during the project, the final account can become a bit messy and a bit of a negotiation, and someone's going to walk away feeling a bit hard done by. But it's because they haven't had their ducks in a row during the project.
Right. And which one are you?
More of a CQS. So I have done some PQS stuff, but I would have worked for a fit-out company, and in that capacity I was a contractor's QS, and now I run my own contracting company, so I'd represent my own interests, if you like, as the contractor.
Okay. Which do you prefer? Like, do you have a preference whether you work on this for the client or the customer?
I think they both represent their challenges. Like the PQS side it can be quite interesting if you're at a kind of like cost planning stage and you're trying to do like value engineering and stuff like that on a project. That is actually quite interesting. But I suppose there's more of a hustle on the contractor side, you know, and it can keeps you sharp. So one kind of makes you think. Kind of at a kind of high level, in the sense that you're kind of putting like high level number on things because you don't know the true scope and how the design is going to be exactly. So when you're assessing something from a cost plan perspective as a PQS, but then when you're on the contractor side, there's definitely more of a hustle. So that's is enjoyable, you know.
You prefer the hustle. Okay. And was the plan always to be like, I don't know, are you a social media influencer, or are you a home to restore, right? You have 70k followers.
Yeah.
So was that always the plan?
No, never. Sure, when I was in school, like, that didn't exist. When I was in school, Bebo was beginning to emerge, and it was like...
Your top 5.
Yeah, MSN Messenger was the other thing. And you used to go on MSN Messenger at like 9 o'clock at night, and like all your friends would be online, and you'd like... It was the most boring thing in the world, though. Like, I'd no real interest in it. And then it was Bebo. And then I remember when I was in college, I'd say in and around first year of college, Facebook became a thing. But it was kind of like, that's kind of for like, serious people sort of thing. Sure, we're only 19. We'll stay on Bebo. But then probably within about 18 months, everyone was on Facebook. And then obviously Facebook, I deleted my Facebook years ago, and then Instagram. But I was never really much of an Instagrammer. And then I set up Houses to Restore during the recession, during the pandemic.
Okay.
And it just sort of, like, I won't say it blew up, but like I had 2 goals. And I always say this, people are probably sick of me hearing this, but one was to get 750 followers and one was to post once a week. Okay. So I kind of felt, if there's 750 people willing to follow me, I'm willing to post once a week.
Okay.
So I kind of thought, like, that's a bit of validation, like, and yeah, the 750. But then, like, so I put the page together, and within a short space of time, it began to get a bit of traction. And like, I probably, like, maybe after 3 or 4 months, I probably did have 3 or 4 or 5,000 followers. And then I think it was by the Christmas. So I set it up at the end of May in 2020. And by Christmas, I can't remember, it was either just before or just after Christmas in 2020, I had 10,000 followers. But then it went from 10 to 20 by, I'd say, St. Patrick's Day, like in 2021. Right. So it doubled. Like the number of followers went from 10 to 20 in half the amount of time, basically.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And is that like what you specialize in, is like restoration projects, or do you do a mix of everything?
So I've ended up doing a mix of everything, but to be honest, pre-Houses to Restore, I was doing mainly commercial work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I would, like, so my dad was a painting contractor, and he would have worked in loads of commercial buildings. And then when I was doing the QSing, when I was working for a company, it was commercial fit out. And then I was doing some consultancy work, and it was always commercial projects. Right. So I would have worked on things like Boland's Mill and U2's place. I was there yesterday in Perpetua, the gym, Windmill Lane. Right. So loads of buildings like that. I would have been involved with when they were being built, when I was working as a consultant. Again, that was all pre-Houses to Restore. So very much commercial. But the thing about the residential space is, like, the residential space, it can be a bit like the Wild West, in the sense that, like, often homeowners agree to have contractors do work for them, and there's no great transparency in their costs. Their quotations aren't really that detailed. There may be no quotation. Yeah. It could be a one-liner in a text message. It can all be a little bit vague. Payment terms are a little bit vague, and it's all a little bit loose. So I set up Houses to Restore with no intentions of renovating any houses, purely for a bit of crack. But I realised then there was a pattern of various different problems, I suppose, people were experiencing. And then construction costs went mental. So I started to help people with costings for their renovation projects. Then I began to do the renovation projects in houses. So we were still doing the commercial stuff, but we were also doing some residential stuff. But it was to try and professionalise it in a way that you were kind of approaching a residential project like the way a commercial project would be approached. Because the two worlds, even though, you have an electrician maybe working on a commercial project, and let's just say an electrician working on a residential project, but even just the way residential projects are ran, they're just so different than
it's not more laid back, is it? Then
it is. No, it is. Yeah, you're spot on. Just commercial jobs by nature tend to be more efficient. And they tend to be more efficient because if you look at, say, a building like that Windmill Lane, for example, that would have just been open plan spaces, and then the tenants come in and they do their fit out. Yeah. So it's kind of like a copy and paste job almost, like there's just a system in place. Whereas when you're doing a house, like, there's a different system on every house, because every house you renovate is somewhat bespoke. So it is less efficient, and there's a lot more thinking involved with it, to be fair, because everything is just that little bit different, and each client wants something a little bit different. So they're slower in that sense, and there's also, like, an awful lot of decisions to be made. And that's one thing people, like, don't realize when they're renovating a house. So many decisions. People are slow at making decisions, and it can be difficult making the decision when you're under pressure and you're spending your money, and if your budget's tight, like, it's a difficult thing to do. So as a result, sometimes some people don't make the decisions quickly enough, and then that may mean the lads have to pull off a residential project, and it slows down the progress on site a little bit as a result. Whereas when you have a commercial project, typically, like, there's an architect involved, you'll have your PQS, you'll have, say, a structural engineer, you'll have building services or a mechanical and electrical engineer. So you'll have a range of people. There might even be, like, an acoustics engineer, like a huge range of people that you just don't have in a residential project. So with the commercial stuff, it's way more transparent. And back to what we were saying about what the QS does initially, the PQS will be at that stage assessing everything from the mechanical engineer, the structural engineer, the electrical engineer. Everything's put into that bill of quantities. So it's all very, very transparent on a commercial project. The odd little thing will arise, and I know you hear stories like the National Children's Hospital. That's a completely different scenario. due to the way the government run contracts. But for the most part in the commercial project, they run very smoothly. But the residential stuff can be a bit mad because often you need to start the project because there's something else starting, but all of the decisions may not be made by the time you've actually started the project.
Okay. Is that because cost comes into it? Like, it's like in a commercial project, it's company money, right? So it's like there's a lot more disposable there, let's say.
Yeah.
Whereas a residential, it's like, I'm borrowing from the bank. This is all I can get from the bank, and we're trying to cut costs, and then it can probably cost more in the long run.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Is that kind of what that is?
Definitely. It's also, though, because someone's spending their own money,
Yeah.
And like if you're buying something for your business, you mightn't be, not that you don't care as much, but it won't mean as much to you. So for example, like we're in this room here, and let's just say you were tasked with painting the walls and picking the new floor. You're gonna pick something that's functional and practical and that's easy to clean for this room, and then you're gonna paint it. If it's a little shade off or you're not mad in it, it's not really gonna upset you. Whereas if that's your sitting room in your house and you pick a floor and you're thinking, oh God, I don't know if I like the shade of that. Every time you look at it, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit. You know that kind of way?
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit different. There's more of an emotion in a residential project than there is in a commercial. Okay. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of people to overcome. And it is difficult to do. And look, I've bought a fixer-upper. I'm hoping to get the keys now in the next couple of weeks. And even for me, like, I'm great at just being very transparent with clients, but I was looking at my own house and there's just a detail at the back of the house. And I was looking at it for a couple of weeks and saying, like, what am I going to do with that? And it's not because I don't know what I'm going to do. It's just because all of a sudden you're kind of emotionally invested. And to be honest with you, in that sense, Connor, it's not even that I'm looking at the money side of it. That's not even the part for me. It's more so, what's the best approach to actually take with that little space? Does it need to be extended, or can we just repurpose what's already there type thing? So, and it's funny because if I was, say, advising yourself and it was the same house, I'd be just more transparent about it because it's just black and white. It's more transactional.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's like if you were picking the finishes for this room, like what I was saying there a second ago, whereas when it's your own house, it is just, you want to get it right. And I think that perfectionist element kicks in a lot of people.
Okay.
And they just want it to be the way they want it to be, you know?
That's fair enough.
But also, like, it's like, you're in recruitment, right? So if I was to enter into your world, I've some experience recruiting because I run a company myself, but like you're going to be way more versed in it because you're doing it 5 days a week and you've been doing it for years and years. So it's like the same thing if you go to renovate a house. The homeowner, they might work in recruitment, they might work in finance, they may never have even stepped foot in a building site in any shape or form. They might not have even done a DIY project, and all of a sudden they're undertaking this project. And I suppose they don't realise how big a task it is because you look at it on TV and you look at Room to Improve and you think, oh, that's lovely. Like, look at how that came together.
On the day.
Yeah. But then what you need to do is, I say this all the time, and I was on News Talk yesterday and I said this, you need to watch an episode of Room to Improve, really enjoy it, but then maybe watch 3 episodes of Grand Designs to see the reality of what really happens.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Some of them projects take like 5 years on that Grand Design project. It's mental. I don't know if I could like, we got something done out the back garden there. And I couldn't believe the cost, right? And then it is very higgledy-piggledy, this is the price, and then it's like, oh, we've gone over, or this isn't going to work, we're going to have to change the layout. And you're just like, for fuck's sake, like, we should have like agreed this from the start and had a bit more of a set structure.
Yeah.
But a lot of builders or residential builders aren't really open to that,
No.
They're just like, no, whatever, we'll get that job done for you, it's grand, leave us to it. And then it's like, not what you wanted, and it's totally different.
It's loose.
Yeah.
It's really loose, and people are spending so much money, and that's the part that breaks my heart. But that is what you're up against in that space, and that's not being disrespectful towards anyone. It is just the reality and the nature of the beast, I suppose.
Yeah, and sometimes builders also, they're not the easiest people in the world to deal with.
No.
So would you like handle the management of the builder then as well?
Yeah.
And kind of see the project through start to finish?
Yeah.
Or like, is it just, this is what I do, this is what I've told the builder to do, pay me and see you later kind of thing?
No, so we're effectively like a management contractor.
Okay.
So it's like being a main contractor, but you do it a bit differently. So typically a main contractor would have had loads of people directly employed. And since the recession in Ireland, that model has changed. So a lot of the large players, like the Clancy construction type, would have probably had 200 or 300 people working for them.
Okay.
During the Celtic Tiger. And they would have had loads of directly employed operatives like carpenters and whatnot.
Right.
But now they'd have like a management structure, as in they might have, say, 50, 60, 70 people working for them. They may have more, but they're more on roles like site management, maybe general operatives, quantity surveyors, project managers, and then they subcontract in all the specialist trades. So they'll get in carpentry, they'll get in, plasterers or tapers or whatever they need, electricians and that. And that's the model that I work through myself, right? So it's great because it means that if you're not crazy busy, you don't have a massive staff to feed. And equally then, if you are very busy, it's just a case of then either giving the existing subcontractors more work if they have the capacity, or just taking finding an additional subcontractor to do some work for you. So we'll take a project on and we'll just divvy it down into the various different packages. So you'll have someone in doing the strip out and the demolition. You'll have someone else in doing electrics. You'll have a plumber on site doing the heating and the plumbing in the bathroom and stuff like that. You'll have a carpenter. You'll have a plasterer. You'll have a window company, all the things that you need, and we'll coordinate and organise all that sort of stuff, and then we'll have someone doing the running around, keeping the place tidy, sweeping the floor, making sure the skip is filled, making sure the skip is collected, the donkey work. But that's actually, I suppose saying donkey work's a bit degrading, because it is actually, like, that's the thing that actually keeps the job going. Because if the place is filthy, lads come in, they just think, actually, this place is filthy, no one cleans up after themselves. Whereas if you give someone a place that's spotless, lads are more inclined then to leave it clean because they've no excuses. Do you know that kind of way? So that role is actually really important, to be fair. So that's how we approach it. And the things that we're working on at the moment, we do a lot of work for the Department of Education. So we work in schools, and we're reconfiguring a lot of classrooms into autism rooms. So there are existing classrooms and they get turned into autism rooms, and there's kind of a set technical guideline that you have to follow for that. So we've been busy doing that. We've done a lot of them. Emergency works as well in the schools, mainly fixing roofs. So a lot of that. Then we do a lot of work in churches. We worked in 3 churches last year. We're about to start a project in Dolphin's Barn Church in a couple of weeks' time, the end of March. And then houses. So we've 3 houses now on site, one in Malahide, one in Donecarney, and one in Clontarf. And then those other houses then coming on stream then as well. So that's the approach that we take. Yeah. I'll be involved with the Department of Education stuff, and I suppose the church, that's slightly different. But say with the houses, I'll be involved with the client right from the very start. Yeah. I'll meet them, and before they decide to do anything, I'll put costings together for them so they can see how much all their ideas are going to cost. And that gets a conversation going as to what are we going to include or what are we going to exclude. Like, basically, what can we afford to do? And then the process starts from there with them. And I love that, because you have that collaborative piece, and you can offer a lot of value there to a client when you're actually starting with them from scratch, and then you can get everyone on the same page. Because what I find in construction is that often what can happen is, if a client goes, say, to a QS or an architect, and then they're going to a builder, there's a lot of value in each of those stages. So if a client meets me in the QS capacity to get an idea of costings for all of their ideas, like how much are my ideas going to cost, basically, I do that piece of work, and then let's just say I disappear and they go to an architect. There's a gap in information there from me, say, to the architect, and the client is starting again then with the architect. And there's loads of things that I might have realised that the project may need, and there's lots of information that I've picked up that doesn't get passed on to the architect in the situation of a client just dealing with me and then moving on to an architect. And then when you're dealing with the architect may go to a QS to put a bill of quantities together, and then the bill of quantities gets sent out to the various different contractors, the price for the job. So you have so many people involved, and then every single one of those stages, I think information is lost, like value is lost. Right. Whereas if you have something where you're with the client from the start and you're kind of holding their hand from the start, it's way more collaborative, and people just get more comfortable working with each other, and you can understand where the client is coming from. Whereas if I come in as a contractor and I'm just pricing the job and I'm looking at it and saying, well, why aren't they doing A, B, and C? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Right. But it might be because they just don't have the money, and there could be method in their madness. And you know that because you've been dealing with them from the start, and you have a feel for how much they want to spend and what their needs are in the here and now. So that's a nice approach. And then with the other stuff, you tender for the other stuff like any contractor will. You'll just get an email or a query for the commercial projects, and you'll go and you'll just put your best foot forward. You'll put your best bid forward for the project, and you just hope that you'll get it, basically. Yeah. Like, it's like any business in that sense. Yeah.
When you do that, like, and you put your tender forward, let's say, is it a race to the bottom, like cheapest price gets it, or is it, reputation, media, like kind of mid-level, mid-range costing, or is it more reputation based?
it can be all of those things depending on who you're dealing with.
Right.
Like sometimes you could price, like let's just say myself and yourself priced a project, and I'm 100 grand and you're 75 grand. But if you look at your 75 grand, you could have left out 3 things that I've included. And those 3 things could be worth 30 grand, just for argument's sake.
Okay.
So that 75 that you're at may really be 105. So it is important to kind of scrutinise a tender to see what's included. Like we did a project a couple of years ago in a church, and like we were in the middle. We were number 2, and there was someone else cheaper, and there was obviously someone higher. And the person higher was like maybe 10 or 15% higher. They were put in and around where we were. Like it wasn't a massive thing. But someone else was like maybe half what we were.
Okay.
And their tender was just the client just said, look, we've someone who's like considerably lower than the 2 of you.
Yeah.
But it's so low, we're sort of worried, we think there's something missing. But I was told afterwards what actually happened was that other person, there was a need for scaffolding on this particular project, and the scaffolding was a massive cost. They hadn't actually allowed for the scaffold. They just assumed that the church were going to provide the scaffold. So as a result, that brought their price then up to probably 200 grand, if you know what I mean, because of the price of the scaffold.
Yeah.
So, like I know on that project, I think the scaffold cost us 80 grand or 70,000 or something. So like when you factor in the VAT then on top of that, that's the guts of 100 grand,
Yeah.
So that's where the discrepancy was in their one. So you can have a little bit of that. So sometimes the cheapest always isn't, like the race to the bottom, the person that's at the bottom isn't always the best because they could have left a lot of things out. Now in some scenarios, like if it's a Department of Education contract, like that's just fixed price lump sum.
Yeah.
There's no real going back and saying any chance of a few more quid, But then often on projects like that, the quality suffers in some of those jobs, and that's problematic then because you can see it. And like whoever, say if it's the context of a school or like a Garda station or something that the OPW are building, like whoever's using that building for the next 40, 50, 60 years suffers the consequences of the building being badly built, So it is a little bit of an art, I suppose, But you are right, it can be one of all 3 scenarios. Reputation, maybe they go for someone that's kind of in the middle as opposed to the cheapest. But in some context, it can be a race to the bottom, yeah.
If, let's say, you submitted a tender that was, like, lower, right, and you missed something like the scaffolding, is it a case where, you can go back to the company and ask for, like, more money, or is it a case where they're saying, tough shit, we have you legally bound now? Or is it kind of...
Depends on who you're dealing with. Some people can be reasonable. Like, if you hit a stumbling block, like, we've been in situations where, say, in a house, I can think of one example where we went in, and the place was full of wallpaper, and they'd gotten a building survey done, and like the house was grand, it was dated, but it was fine,
Yeah.
But when the lad stripped off all the wallpaper, it was transparent that there was no lintel above one of the doors, and there was a block wall,
Okay.
So there was no lintel there. So obviously you can't stand over that and say. But then the other thing was the wall was actually kind of shaking. It wasn't really as solid as it should be, Now it was only going from the ground floor, and it was supporting the joists above it. But it's not good if the joists are sitting on a wall that's kind of partially shaken,
Yeah, jeez. They come through the roof.
But it was like that for years. It was like that for years. So in that context, like we had to get a structural engineer in.
Yeah.
We had to prop the house up. We had to demolish that wall. The wall had to be rebuilt. And the structural engineer had to be paid. So something like that cost a couple of grand. But no one could have like predicted that because there was nothing about that wall that you would have got that impression of.
Okay.
Like when you were pricing the job. So you can have scenarios like that no one could foresee.
Okay.
That you just have to say, well, okay, like that's fair, that's transparent, that's a genuine thing. But if you do something that like it's very obvious you're going to need scaffold and you don't allow for it, I think most people would turn around and just say, look, that is on you. If it is something, say it maybe as obvious as that, Yeah, so it just depends on what the issue is that crops up.
Yeah, I get
and it does also depend on, like you are right, it does depend on the form of contract. Okay. Like if you're doing a job for the government and you go in and you start putting in foundations and the ground is just full of rock, there's nothing you can really do on that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Now often they'll have like a site investigation report and you can suss all that out, and for the most part the information is there, so you'll have to do your own bit of research. But you could get caught out in something like that, Right. Or if you've really bad weather like what we've had, and like you're putting foundations in and the foundations just get full of water, like you can't really go back for a claim to say, well look, I have to remove the water to That's just something you sort of have to suck up, no pun intended.
Okay, yeah. and swinging all the way back, right? School days, right? Like, were you just like, a musician, kind of no plans, or how did you get on academically?
I was so lazy in school.
Right.
I had no real interest in school. Like, I hate saying that. I didn't, though. And I actually couldn't wait to leave school. But then I was the jammy fella as well. Like, I was kind of clever, like, in the sense that I'd been to a Gael school, so I knew I'd good Irish.
Okay.
I was good at playing music. So it was like, you could do a practical exam that would cost you 50%. So I was like, I'm going to play to my strengths here at my Irish, my music. And then randomly enough, I don't know how I figured this out. Like, I picked geography. I absolutely hated it.
Right.
And we had a teacher, he was grand, but like, he didn't really cover the course with us, So I was like, what are we going to do? Like, we don't know half this course. So kind of just started teaching myself a few bits just in the run up to the Leaving Cert. Yeah. And there was one question that we had to do, which was like a field trip thing. And it was just literally regurgitate a field trip that we went on a piece of paper. That was grand. And then I taught myself like aerial photography and ordnance survey maps.
Okay.
They were kind of handy. And then there was another yoke about tourism. And so I went in to do my Leaving Cert because I couldn't remember all the stuff for the physical geography. Like, I can't remember things like that happened in a particular order, you know? So I was really in trouble. If I had to do a bit of physical geography, I probably would have failed the thing. So I went in, right? So between those 3 exams, I got an A2 on the 3 of them. So those 3 alone, I got 270 points. And then I just got through the other stuff. Like, I did English. I was atrocious at English. Like, my sister's an English teacher. And when I was doing my junior cert, we got our mocks back, and she was looking at my mocks, and she was just looking at it as if to say, like, what is this about? Like, so I was doing the honours, and she said to me, like, is there any chance you can drop down to pass? And that was my own sister, and she's a teacher. Like, that's how bad it was. But I do think, to be honest, I have dyslexia, because when I went to college, my first assignment I did in college, I actually got pulled aside because they thought I had done plagiarism. But I actually genuinely hadn't. It was just it was that badly written, because I have a habit of like leaving a lot of words out and mixing things up and stuff. And I think that's why I struggled with physical geography. I just couldn't remember the order of what happened, like if it was some sort of plate tectonic or volcano movement or something.
Right.
I'd kind of have a rough idea of what was going on,
but
I couldn't write it down. I just couldn't remember the sequence of it. So I actually really struggled with things like assignments and stuff, But I did get through school and I got through college, and the reason I got through it was I had an English teacher in 5th year in school, Miss Dunn, and she taught us how to do a mind map. And she said, if you ever get into a situation where you're asked a question in your exam and you don't know what the question really is, she said, you'll know loads about the story they're asking you about, or the poem or whatever. So she said, just put a little mind map and put the name of the story or the name of the poem in the middle of the mind map, and just write out everything that you know about that story or that poem or that poet or whatever it was for the English exam. And she said, you'll realise that you have loads and loads and loads, like, you know loads about it. The question might just be phrased in a particular way that's putting you off. But if you have all that information in front of you, all of a sudden you'll be able to put an answer together. And I think, to be honest, if she hadn't taught me that,
good technique, actually. Yeah, I've never heard that before.
I would have failed. I would have failed college. Right. I wouldn't have got through. I would have found it too difficult. Like, so even I would have really struggled. So that was a big help to me, and she doesn't know that, actually.
No, she does. We'll clip it up for her.
I haven't been in contact with Miss Dunn in a long time, but credit where credit's due. So that's what I did. I played to my strengths, but I was clever enough knowing that I was playing to my strengths. But I didn't I think I started studying a week or two before my Leaving Cert.
Yeah, like probably everybody else.
I was a devil, like an absolute devil. And but I left secondary school with 465 points in my Leaving Cert, so that wasn't too bad.
No, okay, yeah. And were you straight out then into college, or were you working?
No, I took a year out.
Okay.
Because I was kind of himmy and high about the QS and the music, you see. So I was like, I'm going to take a year out, because I didn't do TY, and I was drumming for the year.
Right.
And then I was teaching a bit of music. I think I was teaching music one evening a week, and then I was probably doing a gig a week as well. So I was getting a couple of £100 doing that, and it was great. And I wanted to buy a car as well, and then I was doing a music diploma. So I was kind of like, I think I figured out if I spend the money I make teaching, and that keeps me going, and then I'll save all the money I get from the gigs,
right,
I'll buy the car. And that's what I did. So I was delighted.
Nice.
Bought a car for cash the following year. I was thrilled. But it was great, actually.
Were you in a band, or were you just like single drummer?
No.
And what drums do you play? Like,
yeah, so I was a session musician, I suppose is the best way of putting it. I was in a web band for a while, but it wasn't really my vibe. So from a drumming perspective, I would have done things like musicals, corporate gigs, that type of thing. And then I played percussion, and that would be like you go into an orchestra and you play the xylophone or the bass drum or the cymbals, or maybe the drum kit, depending on what's in the score, you know.
Right.
So I was lucky. Like that year, I put a lot of time into my music. The year I took out, like I was very focused on it. Like I was probably practicing 5-6 hours a day. Jeez. And we had a great teacher, a guy called James Dunn. He was brilliant. And I think he'd just gotten a job in the RTÉ Concert Orchestra at the time. I think he wasn't there that long anyway. And so he was there. And then there's, in an orchestra, each section will have like, I suppose, a boss, if you like. And there was a guy called Max who was the section leader, and he was Italian. So I got a gig, and funnily enough, an old music teacher of mine, Conor O'Riordan. So I was in the RTÉ Boys Band when I was younger, and Conor O'Riordan was one of our teachers. But Conor was leaving, and we were all disappointed that he was leaving because he was a sound lad. But he was going off to manage the RTÉ Concert Orchestra. So I said to him jokingly one day, you're going to have to give me a few gigs in a couple of years' time, aren't you? Do you know, because I would have kind of had that relationship with him. Yeah. And he says, you have a few things to sort out with your playing, but if you sort those few things out with your playing, I will give you a few gigs. So that's in part why I took the year out. So I took the year out and done what he told me to do. And then, fairness to him,
he gave you the show?
Yeah. So it was between Conor and James, to be fair. So Conor O'Riordan and James Dunn. So between the two lads, they got me in. But then actually, there was a funny twist of events. So then Max decided to take a career break.
Okay.
And then James was sort of filling in for him. And then there was another person there who was due to retire. I think he either retired a bit earlier than they expected or something. So all of a sudden, the section went from having 3 players to only having 1, because 1 was on career break and 1 retired earlier. Maybe that man got sick. I can't remember the story. So it meant then there was a shortage of players. So I just happened to be at the right place in the right time for something.
Yeah.
And then I just began to get loads of gigs in the concert orchestra, and it was really great. Like, and it was one of those things that it's not that I didn't appreciate it at the time, but you just didn't realize, I suppose, how cool it was in some ways. Like you'd be going over to RTÉ, they play in studio, or they rehearse in Studio 1 in the radio centre, and it was back in the days where like Pat Kenny and Gabe Byrne and all these people.
But you got to meet them.
So not that you get to meet them, but you'd be walking through and you'd see them on like. There'd be like a passageway through, and you could kind of see the studios and the meeting rooms, and you could see them on air, like. So it was pretty cool.
Oh, okay.
And then sometimes, like, say, Ryan Tubridy would have been on the radio, and then he might have like a broadcast, and he's like, okay, we're going to go into Studio 1 now, and the orchestra are going to play from Studio 1. So you're playing live radio.
Yeah.
And Ronan Collins was another. So there's a few radio shows that we would have played on as part of it. And then, like, we would have done like a lot of gigs in places like the National Concert Hall, the Helix, City Hall in Cork.
What's the biggest crowd you would have played in front of?
Oh, I don't know. A couple of thousand people, maybe. Right. I'm not sure.
Would that bother you, or would you be fairly confident that you were just kind of, you knew you were good, you put in the hours, and
yeah, look, it depends on what you're doing. Like, there's times when you're in these organizations that, like, you might only have a very short rehearsal and then you have a gig to do.
Oh, okay.
And I remember doing a gig once in the National Concert Hall, and like it was pretty demanding. Like, you're under pressure. And when you're playing percussion, you're not just sitting in the same place. You're going from instrument to instrument to instrument. And whatever way the parts were given to me, like for each chart, like all the bits I was doing, a lot of them were very, very exposed. As in, you might be just playing by yourself or playing with 1 or 2 other people. So you really had to get it right, you know? Okay. So there's sometimes where you will be under pressure, like, and then other times you wouldn't be. But actually, do you know what? Sometimes you play better when you're under pressure. And when you're doing something simple, your brain switches off. Yeah. So sometimes it's good. It is good. And that's the same with everything in life, isn't it? Like, so it is good to be busy, and it is good to have that challenge. But yeah, and look, it was an enjoyable challenge. So that's how that was. So I did that then, and then
how many people are actually in the orchestra, like, or and then is it like everything stops and it's just you kind of playing for those solo pieces, and they're still on stage, or does everyone leave and you're just kind of out in the middle of the stage? No,
you'd all be on the stage together. Okay. There might just be a little exposed piece, you know, where the instrument you're playing just happens to feature, if you know what I mean, and you're carrying the tune. Yeah. And if you don't carry the tune, no one else is carrying the tune, let's just say. Okay. And like people would be in the audience would kind of be wondering, what's going on here? Right. That doesn't sound like the way it's supposed to. But no, everyone would be on the stage. And in terms of numbers, so there's kind of 2 types. Well, there's a couple of different types of orchestras. Like, you can have a chamber orchestra, which is a small orchestra. Typically a chamber orchestra wouldn't have much need for percussion, and then you'd have a concert orchestra, which would probably have like you could have it probably anywhere between about 35 and 50 people, and you could have a symphony orchestra where you kind of have like maybe 50 to 60 people plus. So the National Symphony Orchestra would probably have the guts of maybe 80 people in it, like in Ireland. And then the RTÉ Concert Orchestra probably have around 40, roughly speaking. They might not necessarily have 40 full-time permanent members, but they'd bring in a few depths or freelancers to cover various different things. Right. So that's what you'd kind of need.
And do you still dip in and out, or
no?
No. You're retired.
Retired.
You still play at home, or no interest?
No, I dabble a little bit. Like I actually had a couple.
Be giving out about you.
No, I actually have a couple of practice pads, and I hadn't played in a while. And then during COVID, I kind of took it out, and I was like, kind of had like, well, I get back to doing a bit. And then I just realized like just the discipline and the time it takes. Yeah. But then like I do other things like where I might just take out the practice pad. Now I haven't done it in ages. I've put the odd little clip up on Instagram actually, but yeah, that's about the extent of it at the moment. I have 2 drum kits that have been literally in a wardrobe in my spare room. Right. But when I move, I will likely buy an electronic drum kit. Okay. And just there's an attic room in the house I'm after buying, so I'll likely just put an electric drum kit up there.
And then when did you decide to go to college then during all this to do the QS side of things?
So when I took my year out, I went back to college then. Like my parents kind of wanted me to go to college. I didn't particularly want to go to college at that point, and to be honest, if I didn't have the music, I probably actually would have done something like a state agency, and I would have, because there was courses where you could go to college like one day a week, and that would have actually really suited me, you know.
Okay.
So I was kind of, if I wasn't playing music, I probably would have ended up doing something like that, to be honest. But I ended up going and doing arts, and the reason I did arts was I purposely like spent a significant amount of time figuring out what college I could go to and what course I could do with the least amount of contact hours.
That was the thing, just the least of. But like, you obviously would have had like a strong work ethic, right, from like practicing music and stuff.
So I needed to tick the box because my parents wanted me.
Oh, they're on your back.
My siblings had all gone to college, so the expectation was I'd go to college.
Right.
So I was like, which way am I going to do this? So I ended up doing arts, and I was very rarely in college for the first 18 months.
Did you go in for the sessions or anything? No,
a little bit, but I was just so like. The gigging had kind of taken off me at that point. So I was gigging. I didn't really I had a one-track mind. I didn't really care about anything else. Right. And I was just gigging. And that was kind of my clique, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I was enjoying that. Like, and then it kind of, as I say, probably about halfway through second year, then I kind of got more into the college buzz because things got a little bit more serious then. And like some of your assignments actually began to count. Whereas when you were in first year, nothing really mattered. It was just a case of getting through to second year. So just as the second year exams came up, I was like, I know I kind of need to knuckle down a little bit here. Like, I can't wing this. But then also, like, I was looking at courses then. Like, the quantity surveying was in the back of my mind. And I was looking up courses in Scotland, actually, because they had a course over there that you could do. It was like a conversion program. So you'd do like an intense master's over 18 months. Right. And then you'd be a QS at the end of it. So I was all set and going to Edinburgh to do that. But then what actually happened was Bolton Street, DIT in Bolton Street, which is what TU Dublin now, that launched the very same program, but it was part-time, so it was over 3 years. So I went and I did the one at Bolton Street instead of going to Edinburgh.
Right. And you done it part-time?
Yeah, it was really, really difficult, like, because it was at 6 o'clock until 10 o'clock, 2 nights a week. And then you have all the assignments on top of that, and then you did thesis to do. And again, like, I really struggled with the thesis, like, really found that difficult. And I found anything written like a real challenge. Yeah. But luckily enough with the QSing, because it's a lot of it's sort of numbers based, I do actually have a head for numbers. So once you get your head around actually how you're supposed to measure a building, it's kind of okay, you know?
Right.
So I found that part all right, but actually the having to write assignments and do essays and stuff, I really found that difficult.
Yeah. Is that the only path to becoming a QS, is have a degree and then do the masters, or can you just go do a 3-year course and be a quantity surveyor? Yeah, so there's 3 routes now. Right. So one is you just go to college and you do a degree straight from school, and it takes 4 years and then you're qualified. The second is you do like what I did, I suppose. You do a master's, and you could have done something else in your undergrad. I was probably a bit of an exception because I'd done arts and I'd play music, and then I went off to become a QS. In fairness to me, my dad had been a contractor, and I'd kind of been somewhat involved in that business, so I had enough to get me through the application process in Bolton Street. So I got in on that grounds. But a lot of the people that would typically do that option might have done something like maybe construction management or civil engineering or mechanical engineering or something.
And then the third option is there's actually an apprenticeship route now you can do. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's over 5 years. So what happens is that you go to college 1 day a week, and then you work 4 days a week. And then when college is not, like during the summer and stuff like that, you just work 5 days a week. So you're linked with an employer, and then you go 1 day a week, basically.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's actually like, it is a good approach, because it's the sort of job that is quite practical. And even though like you need to learn a lot of the theory and how everything is done in practice, there are a lot of things that I think you can only learn, like a lot of jobs, when you're actually on site.
Yeah.
You know?
Quick pause in the conversation. This episode is sponsored by Nesta Self-Storage. Nesta are Dublin's leading self-storage provider with easily accessible locations right across the city. Their modern units are secure with round-the-clock CCTV surveillance and individual alarms, so your stock and equipment are protected at all times. With units ranging from 20 to over 300 square feet, Nesta has a solution for your storage needs. Stay for a month or as long as you need, with hassle-free access to your unit 7 days a week. Whether it's for your business, a house move, or simply making more space at home, Nesta makes storage easy. And right now, get 25% off your first month's storage using code CS25. Let's get back to it. Here we go.
Given what you know now, what way do you think is the best approach? Do you think it's like the degree? Do you think it's the postgrad, or do you think it's the apprenticeship?
Do you know what? Like, I'm 38 now, and like, I left school when I was 17, so I've been working 21 years.
Yeah.
And I know when you're 17, I know you're in a hurry to start working and start making money, because I know I was. But when you think back, like, you realise the world of work is stressful and it's demanding and everything. And I think there's a lot to be said for going off and doing a college course for a couple of years if you're going to come away with something tangible from it, like a QS program. I know that doesn't suit everyone, but there's so many things you can do if you have the right attitude and you're in college. Like, you can do things like J1s and go to America for the summer. Yeah. Like, there are opportunities that you'll likely never get again in your life. Now, I know not everyone's lucky enough to avail of those opportunities, but there are those sorts of things. So I think that like has real merit for that reason, because I think you learn different kind of skills when you go off and you do those things, and you have stories and you have things you'll appreciate as you get older. Yeah. But I suppose if you just want to go hard at the work thing and make a few bob and get an education, I think the apprenticeship route is very, very good. But I do think the other option of doing the postgrad is great for someone who maybe wants to get into a role. Maybe they might be working in construction and they might realise, actually, no, I'd like to know a little bit more about quantity surveying. It would benefit me, or I'd like to kind of progress on and become a QS. Like maybe someone who's a site manager or a project manager or something, and they want to do something a little bit different. It's great in that sense. It just gives people a range of sort of skills, I suppose. And even like the lads that would have been in Bolton Street with me when I did at that time, like one of them was a civil engineer, one of them was a mechanical engineer, someone else was a landscape architect. One of the girls was working as a QS, but she'd done a commerce degree, so she just needed to get a qualification, basically. One of the other lads had done like land surveying, so there was a complete mix of us in the room, you know.
Okay.
But everyone got a benefit from it, because, like, say Jenny, who had the commerce degree, who was a QS, then she went off to work for NAMA. One of the other lads went off to work for the NTMA. One of the other lads works in Irish Rail. One of the other lads works for a Tesco, I think. So they've all kind of used that qualification.
Yeah.
And none of us are actually working as a full-time QS, to the best of my knowledge, but we've all used that qualification in a positive way, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And it's really helped us.
Like, QSs are in high demand at the moment.
Yeah.
People who tell me, if you come across a good QS, give me a call. Is it a sexy job, or is it like a boring job that's well kind of compensated? And is it well compensated?
It's definitely not a sexy job.
It's pretty boring.
Although I did make a joke once on Houses to Restore, and I said, give me another meaning for QS, and I put up quite sexy. People thought it was quite funny, to be fair.
It's a QS joke.
Don't know if that can be published now on your podcast.
Yeah, we say whatever you want.
So is it? It's not a sexy job. I'd consider it to be quite. Would it be stressful? It's certainly pressurizing.
Okay.
It's not for everyone, and I think a good QS needs to have a couple of things. I think you need to have good soft skills, because you need to be able to negotiate, and you need to be able to work well with people and get on with people. Because if something is going over budget, or you do come across a problem on site, you have to bring people with you. Okay. You know, if everyone ends up in the shit together, You kind of have to be able to lead that and say, okay, look, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And maybe offer other things. Like maybe there isn't more money because of the form of contract, but maybe it's a case of paying someone a little bit quicker than they were due to be paid or something, just to sweeten the deal. Or maybe do a deal with them on the next, say if you're a subcontractor on site, you say, well, look, this is where we're at on this one. We need to get this over the line. But look, you know, those 2 or 3 other jobs you price for us, we'll talk about those and I'll give you those sort of things. So, you know, you kind of have to come up with ways of negotiating things and sweetening the deal in certain situations. So I think having soft skills are very, very important. But then the other side is you do have to have a technical aptitude of what's actually going on, you know. And I suppose that is a challenge, right? Because this is my take on it. And some people who are in construction, they might disagree with what I'm saying here. But I sort of feel like if I look at someone like my dad, so my dad's 82 and he would have started working in the building game in the late 50s, I think. I think he left school when he was 14. I think the late 50s, early 60s. And for someone of his generation, there would have been a role called an estimator.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So an estimator was someone who worked for a subcontractor who priced work. And typically, for the most part, the estimator was maybe the owner of the business, or in larger businesses, it was someone who was maybe an accomplished carpenter or an accomplished painter or whatever, who just got better and better and better, you know, and kind of went up the ranks in that company into kind of like a charge hand is what it would have been called years ago, or like foreman or whatever, contracts manager. So there was a bit of a progression in that sense. And then they would have maybe ended up in an estimating role because they had a knack for it, right? But now the term QS is used for everything. So a lot of people call themselves QSs, but they're actually estimating.
Okay.
So estimating is a different thing. And then you have QSing. So and maybe I should have brought that up at the start with the CQS and the PQS sort of thing. There is estimating as well, but estimating is kind of pushed under the whole QS thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a different arm to it.
There is a different arm to it, you know. I don't know where we're going with this, but what was the question?
Well, I'm just going with the flow, so don't worry.
So the estimating piece, and you were asking me, like, is the QS job sexy and the technical knowledge? So say, for example,
the
right?
other question then would have been, like, what personality is it suited to? And you're kind of going into that then anyway. So.
Yeah. So, like, let's just say a roofing company hires a QS.
Yeah.
Okay. So a QS will be able to measure a roof, right? And they'll understand some of the constraints, but they mightn't be necessarily the best person to actually estimate that project.
Right.
Because they don't have on-the-ground experience as a roofer.
Okay.
But the role of estimator has gone by the wayside, really. Like, you don't come across estimators being advertised for. In the UK you will, but not so much in Ireland. It's just a QS. And as a QS, you'll be part of a commercial team. And as part of the commercial team, you'll be involved in estimating activities. And I'm sure you've probably seen that from a recruitment perspective.
Yeah.
So the challenge there is like about the job. So it's not a sexy job. I do think you have to have soft skills to bring people with you and to be able to negotiate and communicate and explain why something is the cost it is or whatnot. And then the other part of it is you do have to have a technical knowledge.
Okay.
So it is difficult if you're going to work for a company that's like a specialist in, as I say, roofing or bricklaying or something. You do need to have like on the ground. I feel you need to have good on the ground experience for some roles. So that's a challenge, and that's where the likes of the part-time courses come in great for someone who's maybe started out as a bricklayer, maybe went on and did like a site management or a project management program. And then they say, well, do you know what, actually, I'm doing a bit of estimating. Wouldn't mind learning a little bit more about that. Or maybe they're involved with a project and they got burnt on the project because they just didn't really feel like as if they knew the full extent of how things are measured or whatever. Yeah. And then that might propel them to go off and do the part-time course in quantity surveying. And then that gives them the full range of skills they feel they need. So I suppose in that sense, not a sexy job. There's a technical element. So there's hard skills and soft skills, I think, is what's needed. I think if you want to be a good QS, I do think you need to be somewhat analytical. And I think you have right brain and left brain. And I did a career assessment years ago and someone said to me, you're an oddball, like you're a complete misfit because you're actually equally right-brained and left-brained. Right-brained and left-brained. But I'd say a lot of QSs, I think right brain is like numbers and that sort of side.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine a lot of QSs will be that side. But I have both apparently based on that. And I did that test a long time ago.
Okay.
So I think it is more right brain people. But I do think having the soft skills are really important.
Right. And that's probably why you're more entrepreneurial then.
Yeah.
Because a lot of QSs just like to go to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 gig, and that's them, right?
Yeah. So look, there's another reason I became a QS as well, and I didn't say this. My dad had a business partner.
Right.
And he was kind of saying to me, like, what are you thinking of doing? You know, whatever. as I was getting a bit older, and I was kind of saying, actually, I'm thinking of setting up a construction company. And he's like, what?
Okay. So early on, you were like construction.
100%, yeah. And I'll tell you that story in a second.
Right.
But he said to me, well, look, he said, like, I know me and your dad are in business an awful long time together. But he said, before I met your dad, he said, your dad worked for someone and he worked for him for 12 years. He said, I bounced around an awful lot. And he said, I worked for quite a few people who had really good businesses, or what seemed to be really good businesses. And they were really, like, they'd loads of people working for them and they'd loads of work. But he said a lot of those businesses went out of business because those people weren't able to price work properly. And he said, it doesn't matter how good you are at actually doing the job in hand. It doesn't matter how good a carpenter or painter or floor fitter or whatever someone is. Yeah. If they have the wrong price in on a job and they're underpricing work the whole time, they're going to be exposed. And at some point, they're going to run out of steam. Okay. So he said, if you want to get into this, he said, you really need to learn that. He says, that's the most important thing. He says, everything else, is easy once that's in place. That's like the bedrock of the whole thing. And he said, like, look at me and your dad. There's a lot of stuff we don't take on because, like what you were saying, race to the bottom. Yeah. Don't go near it because can't make it work, can't pay the wages, wouldn't make any sense to do it. Okay. So that was what kind of encouraged me, I suppose. It was kind of in my head. And then I was like, well, what? I was thinking of doing it anyway. So that kind of makes sense. So I did the QS course with the intention of setting up a business from it, as opposed to going off and getting a job at it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I did.
Right. So
I should have started with that, maybe.
Yeah, if he didn't have that conversation with you, would you have went on and done the QS?
It's just interesting. He said that to me because, as I say, right when I was 17 and I was filling out my CAO
that's really good advice. Like,
it is good advice. Yeah.
If he hadn't given you that advice, you probably wouldn't have.
Don't know. Yeah. Maybe
to go down that road.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, but it probably is like if you're a trade and you want to come off your tools. It's probably a good transitional course, would it be?
Yeah, well, it would be. Yeah, it's and I do think some lads who have a trade background make great QSs because they have a thorough understanding of how long something takes. And a lot of the time, when someone like asks you to price something or for a rate for something, they think you have some kind of magic wand. You don't. I don't have a magic wand. Like at the end of the day, it does boil down to like how much time something takes to do, and how much material cost, what plant they need, and any kind of overhead that goes along with that. And that is typically how rates are made up, that form of price. So there's no magic wand, and different companies have different pricing structures because, like, say, I'm just looking here and you have the paneling in this room, and let's just say a carpenter came in here and they were doing the floor and the paneling and they were doing a bit of fitted furniture. Like, some of them might specialise in this and be able to do this really, really quickly. But other lads might be more into first fix and they might look at this and panic and think, oh God, and it might take them way longer to do this just to get the standard, So that's where the pricing comes in. So no QS is going to be able to come in and just run someone else's business and say, this is what you should be charging, because every business has nuances, Oh,
okay, so it's like industry, or it's even like specialisms within the specialism.
There are, yeah. Particularly carpentry is very much like that, I find now. Some lads will just do paneling, some lads will just do floors, some lads will just do fitted furniture, Okay. So some things have totally changed. But just back to what you're saying, the trade piece, I do think that loads of the trades do, particularly for things like M&E, like mechanical and electrical, Because if you have an electrician who's like literally worked on, let's just say, a half a dozen data centers as an electrician, and then he decides to become a QS, he has a pretty good idea what's going on and what's involved, and even if you take numbers and everything out of the equation, he actually has an understanding of, okay, well, that cable needs to go from this point, it needs to go all the way over there. That cable is so long, and it'll take, for argument's sake, 3 lads 3 days to get it from A to B. So he has the nuts and bolts of that in his head. So he knows how much that's going to cost him to do. And then you can figure out what you need to charge as your uplift and whatever else. So if you have that thorough knowledge, you can bend things around a little bit, and when you're stuck for a bit of work or things go a bit quiet, where you can pull back a little bit, because well, look, it's actually going to take the lads 3 lads 3 days to do that. That's going to cost us X amount to do it. So if we charge that, we can afford to do it a little bit less because you have a real thorough understanding of your numbers. The trouble is, in construction, a lot of lads don't have a thorough understanding of their numbers, Yeah. And they think I'll get a freelance QS in and they'll solve all my problems. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Would they have had you out on the sites then when you were younger as well?
Yeah.
What would you have had, like a specialist trade, or would you been like doing the donkey work, as you said, making the tea?
Started at 5.
Started at 5. Mixing cement.
Speciality was folding dust sheets.
Okay.
Then that progressed to well, that's as that. There is a truth in that story, actually. Yeah. My sister went to boarding school, and my dad my mum went to visit her one weekend, and my dad collected me from school. And we used to have a half day from school once a month. My dad collected me from school one Friday, and he was obviously working, you know, and they were finishing a job in a school up the road. So my dad was a painting contractor, so the lads are up finishing off of school, so he brought me up there. There was loads of dust sheets that need to be folded, so we spent the afternoon folding dust sheets. Hilarious. And then like as I got a bit older, like I used to get up really early on a Saturday, like most kids, and watch cartoons and stuff on the TV and have a bowl of Cocoa Pops. But then my dad would be going out to just get gear to basically feed the lads, you know.
Right.
So we'd go to McPherson's on the North Strand, and like thinking back, I was only outside the shop the other day just thinking to myself, like it would have been like picking up hundreds and hundreds of litres of paint, like serious volume. And then we go to places that we discussed off air, like Colbrew Barracks. I'd say we went there every Saturday for a year.
Jeez.
Clancy Barracks, McKee Barracks, like a lot of the army barracks, other places then as well, like other buildings in town for other people. So we would have went and done that on a Saturday. So one thing I learned there was the importance of being organised, because we'd actually get up and we'd have it all done, and you'd get around Dublin so quickly at that hour of the morning. In fairness to him, he'd have everything like ordered from a few days previous. So it would just literally be a case of walking in, signing on the dotted line, grabbing everything, loading, going, and then just going like A, B, and C, and then going home. Like, you could be home by 10 o'clock, but like, and the lads would be in work, and so like we'd have checked in on the lads to make sure that they were all there. All the jobs would have been fed with material, so they were like, everyone would be kept going for the week.
Yeah.
Everything was organised, and it was all done really calmly. So that was one thing I realised from a young age, that that's actually really, really important. So I kind of suppose the first summer then I went working for them was when I was first year summer holidays from school.
Right.
And it was just like they were working in a school actually, and it was just a case of moving furniture out of the way and putting dust sheets down. That's what I was kind of doing. And then just sweeping the rooms after the lads had finished with them. But then when we were doing that, loads of the lads were on price. So I figured out what working on price meant. So when I was 13, I said to my dad, I think I should be on price.
You're trying to get upcharged.
He went mad. He went mad. He goes, whatever about the lads trying to rip me off. My only young fella tried to rip me off. He was going insane. It was so funny.
Did you
why are young lads never happy with what they're offered and all this sort of stuff, you know? Oh, it was so funny. No, I didn't get anything out of him. But so that was that. And then look, I would have done a bit every summer, really, you know. Right. Would I have had the best pair of hands? He used to make a joke, I will turn you into a painter. Yeah, I probably got to a stage where I was kind of okay, right, but I don't think I ever would have been really good enough to make a living out of that, you know, as in physically doing the work. Probably, like, if it's the sort of thing, if you stuck at it, you probably would, but I don't think I would have. What I did notice I became good at, though, I was a good, kind of like a good runner, or a good kind of like organizer, you know? Okay. Like, I kind of had a head for that, like, getting material, dropping material off, getting from A to B, you know, maybe helping them price something, and just all those organisational pieces. I figured I had a head for that, and I don't know if that's because of those Saturday mornings when I was much younger that I realised, oh, this is actually important, and I did really enjoy that. And even now, I don't think, like, I think if I wasn't working for myself, I'd probably really struggle to say, well, what job am I actually going to apply for? Because I don't really feel like I'd necessarily have skills where I'd be employable, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Did you ever have like a job where...
Worked as a QS for a couple of months, yeah.
Okay. How'd that go?
Yeah, no. I found it really boring, to be honest. Okay. And we chatted about this off air. That's why the two of us are laughing. To be honest, right, I'd have various different tasks to do. Yeah. A lot of the time I'd have them done by 12 o'clock. Right. And I'd have to sit in the office until 5. The money was abysmal. And in fairness to the commercial director, Ronan, who I was working under, we were going to site one day and he said, look, I know things are moving too slowly here for you. He said, things will pick up. We're just not particularly busy, but by the looks of things, things will get busier. Just hold on in. And in fairness, I did for a couple of months. And I don't know if it was from having played percussion in the orchestra where I was just used to being under pressure and things being at a pace.
Yeah.
I don't know if that experience sort of went against me in the sense that I expected something to move at a faster pace. But I did leave there then. Yeah. And
was you been doing like kind of mixers, let's say, on the side, or? At
that point, no. I'd stopped gigging. And I went in and I did that, and I just said, look, I'm going to give this a go for a little while. Because, like, just to put it into context, I was probably doing, like, mixers, you know, when I was like 16. Like I was the sort I was the sort of person that I was always gigging and stuff, you see. And I had a friend of mine who used to rent out percussion equipment.
Okay.
So sometimes I'd be doing gigs and you'd need to rent out a particular instrument. So the person who was booking you for the gig, you'd get a fee for that, and then you'd say, look, I have to rent this out, and that's, say for argument's sake, 150 quid to rent that equipment. So there was a friend of mine, and he'd say, look, he said, tell them it's 300 quid, give me 150, and he says, you keep the 150, but you have to collect that and you have to drop it off. I'd say, yeah, no problem. So I had kind of all these little deals on the go, little 150 quid here and 150 quid there. So probably by the time I was 23 and I went to work in that company, there was probably a part of me that was just weary from all those deals. Yeah. So I stopped doing that for a little while, and maybe that's why I found it a bit boring, I don't know. But I ended up, I left there because I had an idea for something else.
How did you quit that job? Did you just like decide one day you were done and not go back, or did you give them a bit of notice? Like,
no, I left. We had a weird arrangement, to be honest. They weren't that busy at the time.
Okay.
And they said, just come in. There's nothing formal here. Like, if it's not for you, it's not for you. If you're not for us, you're not for us.
Yeah.
That's how we did it.
Okay.
They were sound, Dunica and Ronan, 2 sound lads. But probably wasn't like quick enough for me at the time, you know.
And then you're done. So what did you do then after?
So I had an idea in my head. I kind of partially started a business that once I didn't work out, it just didn't have the. It wasn't. So I said about a music school. I had an idea for it to do it in one context that it didn't work. So I had to change the business model. So what I tried to do was, had this idea that have a music school,
okay,
that would be in different locations. So for example, like the Monday was to be, let's just say in Balbriggan, Tuesday was to be in Swords, and I was like, I'm going to get those 2 bases going, and then I'll add more bases, and every day will be somewhere else, and we'll have a really busy day in each location. But it was during the recession, and there just wasn't the appetite to do it. It was really difficult because I didn't want to do I wanted to be very much like the business owner rather than the person teaching the class. So maybe if I was the person teaching the class, it would have worked out for me. But I had people to pay and rent to pay and stuff, and just it became very apparent almost immediately, this isn't going to work. But as part of that business, I wanted to teach music in schools. So I kind of thought, look, I'll start with the mobile piece, as in doing this in Swords, Balbriggan, the different locations, and then I'll add in the schools piece and let that grow.
Okay.
But then it became apparent, okay, that's actually the location piece isn't going to work. So I dropped that like in 2011, gone. It just didn't work. And then I started with the classes in the schools in 2011. So I had that on the go part-time, kind of as a sideline type thing for a little while. And then from 2013, from the time I finished in that job, I focused on that then full-time. Because I knew if I got it, even for myself, I just realised, okay, I'm going to have to do 1 day a week myself, like physically in front of, a group of children teaching music. And if I do that 1 day a week, I'll make more on that 1 day a week doing that than I'll get from working in this job for the week.
Okay.
So I figured, I think I was getting 400 quid a week in the job in 2013. And the other thing, I think it was 365 quid I kind of figured I could get for a day in a school.
Okay.
And I just said, do you know what, if I get 1 day a week, it's more or less the same, and then I'm going to try and grow this. But then I had other music teachers then working for me as well, and that actually grew then. We opened an office in 2014. I took a girl on in the office in 2014 as well, around the time we opened the office, and we went to like an education fair where all the primary school principals would go and stuff. And I think it was by 2016 then, like that we were working in 100 schools. Oh. And it was very busy, yeah. And then at that time, then I was involved with a painting business. So my dad retired with his business partner. I took that business over with what would have been my dad's business partner's son.
Okay.
So I had the music school and I had that on the go, and then I was doing some consultancy work as QS, doing quite a bit of work in London actually, and I was loving it. And then the relationship between myself and the business partner, there was no relationship there really to begin with.
Okay.
We never really got on, to be honest. So that came to an end in 2018.
Right.
And then COVID happened then obviously 2020. So that came to an end kind of towards the end of 2018. And if anyone's ever been in business with someone and you're winding up a company and stuff, it's not as transparent or as easy as it sounds. It takes a couple of months and it just takes a lot out of you. So I was kind of licking my wounds then in 2019. And then 2020 COVID came, and I was like, this is great. Like, this is the holiday I needed, you know? Yeah. So I was delighted during the lockdown. And that's when I set up Houses to Restore then, and things kind of changed for me, yeah. I just needed a bit of headspace. I just needed a break, you know?
Yeah. Was, I suppose, entrepreneur is probably like bred into you from a very young age without you even kind of realising, was it? Are you like someone that's motivated by money? Or obviously never needs money, right? But are you motivated by it, like?
I say no to a lot of things.
Okay.
So I could say yeah to a lot of things that would make me a lot of money.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm in a fortunate position where I can afford to say no to things.
Yeah.
Am I motivated by money? Probably not.
No? Okay.
No.
What is it then that like drives you to like manage all these subcontractors and everything now? Like, because that's obviously like, that can be a pain in the ass, I would imagine.
I love the buzz of it.
Right, the pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that, you think that comes from being on stage and being a like good performer, or
no,
the organisation of it?
No, but I know what I love. I love going and pricing the job, and then someone ringing me and saying, "When can you start?" And I'm like, yes.
Okay, yeah.
I love that. That's the best part. And then it's funny, like, so I love then that part, and you're on site and you're like, oh God, and it's just like you're in the trenches, and it's just like some days it's a shit show, and you're like, oh, what am I doing? Why are we doing this again? Yeah. And then when you get to the end and the place looks amazing, you're like, yes, we did it again.
Right.
And that's what I actually love that. Like, I don't know, someone else asked me that, am I motivated by money? I don't know. I would have been when I was younger, but then you can chase money, and when you start chasing money,
it's hard.
It's very hard. Whereas if you're doing something you enjoy, so I'm in this weird situation now where I'm doing something I'm enjoying, and there's loads of opportunities coming my way, and I'm not going looking for things. They're just sort of coming my way. Yeah. And I find, I don't know if other people are like this, but I find like if I try and put focus on, not focus, but if I try and push, let's just say to make loads of money or to get loads of work or to do a specific thing, and I really try and push it and force it, just doesn't really go anywhere from you. It's just stressful. It's, you kind of have like your stomach is in a knot almost, and you're just kind of out of alignment with yourself. But I find if you're sort of, chilled is the wrong word, but if you're just kind of enjoying things and you're not putting yourself under that pressure, I just kind of find the right things then sort of come your way, sort of thing, you know?
Okay.
So that's how I found it, and I kind of prefer being that. So I suppose the thing that I like the most is peace, actually. Like, so in part, I suppose having money brings some peace, doesn't it? Because money brings you security. It gives you choice. It means you can say no, and no is a very important word, because there's a lot of things, you know, that we do have to do in life that we'd prefer not to do. So being able to say no is important. But I think just having peace in my life as I've gotten older, I've realised is really, really important. And that's why I'm very rigid about who we work for and the sort of projects that we'll commit to and what we expose ourselves to. And I do have certain rules for how I run the business behind the scenes, or certain parameters that, like, there has to be a particular margin in something for us to do, or, you know, it has to be a particular type of project. Like, I'm not going to build an extension in your house, and I'm not going to build a new school, but I'll refurbish all of those things. Right. But I'm not going in digging the ground, you know?
Okay.
So there's certain things that we'll do, and it comes back to the peace thing, because there's just so much uncertainty if you commit to building a school, you know, and you hit the rock, like I was saying earlier, or you start building extensions and stuff. They can't just get messy, and you can end up in squabbles with neighbours, and neighbours can make things difficult from an access perspective and stuff like that. I just kind of feel like life is too short. Or even when you have the weather, the way the weather has been, all of a sudden that turns into a bit of a shit show, because you might have windows ordered to arrive and you just can't get the foundations in because you're kind of pushing everything out, and one job, you know, becomes 5 jobs because you're cancelling things, you're rearranging, you're cancelling again, you're rearranging. So yeah, so peace is the big thing that does. But yeah, as I say, money feeds into peace, doesn't it? Like, when you think about it, you know. And if it does.
You have to like what you're doing though as well, right? Like, you can't.
Yeah, like people think it's gas the way I do of two things that are totally different. But like, when I say I'd fight for the music school, like, say during COVID, like, I was dogged about it, like, and that was a really difficult time because the rules of the game kept changing. But like, I was keeping that business open. Okay. And I think for probably about 18 months, it would have made sense just to close up. But I'm very much like thought outside the box and kept the doors open for that period of time.
Is the music still open?
Yeah.
Okay. So
but that's a deadly business. Like,
it
brings loads of joy, and like, that's important to me. Like, kids love it. Like, and if, like, the tutors that work for us, like, if one of our tutors goes into a school and, you know, there's a girl that teaches for me, Karen, and Karen's only taught for me to go to 10 years now. She goes into a school, like, all you'll see is like kids literally jumping up and down and Karen, and they're delighted to see her.
Okay.
Teachers are delighted to see her. So, like, when you see that in place, like, I don't know if money, like, can like, that's a nice feeling. And by doing it then, and if you're getting more work, that business is getting a bit busier and stuff. But, like, it's not the most lucrative business either at the same time. Do you know what I mean? But there is a huge enjoyment piece, and it does bring a lot of joy. And then we did, like, other projects during COVID where we were bringing a 30-piece orchestra into schools, and that brought a massive amount of joy around the place. Like, there's a couple of like, kind of in-house documentaries done in it, as opposed to, like, an RTÉ documentary or something. But, like, some of the stuff that was filmed, like, just phenomenal to see in action, you know? We did a project called the Songs Project, and we brought a tutor into 4 different schools and just taught the kids a load of songs, basically. And the kids then came into an auditorium. They formed the audience, but they were singing along with the orchestra, and it was just absolutely brilliant. Like, it was class.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so putting on those productions and stuff. So again, just the...
You've got, like, the passion project then as well, like, mixed into
so that was great. Like, so I really enjoy that, but then I do also thoroughly enjoy the piece. Like, as I say, you go when you, like, you do a project and you finish the project and you look at it and you think of how it was before you started and how it is now.
Okay.
And I love, like, passing buildings and saying, oh, we worked there, that still looks good. Do you know?
Yeah.
Like,
or that's Asian well kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Like, there's things like that, you know. I do get a kick out of that, you know, but within that, you can make that as stressful as possible.
Yeah.
But I think I do like to try and make it peaceful.
Yeah. What's your vetting process, right? So I don't think you have, like, a big headcount on the QS side of things or your contracting business.
No.
But what's the vetting process you would put, like, a subcontractor through? Because it's still, like, you're still interviewing them for a job and you're entrusting with them, like, a cost, and that they'll deliver, you know.
Someone else, I was on, there's a friend of mine, Kuan, and he runs a Irish show on News Talk.
Okay.
And the interview was asked Gaeilge, like, and he was asking me the same question. Truthfully, a lot of the time I go with my gut.
Right, okay.
Because you get a gut feeling off somebody. And if I get a bad gut feeling, I won't use them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a referral. So you might ask someone that's doing work. So say, for example, there's a company that does our commercial electrical work. Yeah. They don't do residential work. And I kind of put it to them a few times and they just said, no, it's just not what we do, but try such and such, they'll do that for you.
Right.
So I'd lean into that and trust their judgment because I know they're good at what they do. So I'd get some recommendations. There's some people then that I'd know just from over the years, like, you know, that they're good at what they do. Like, there's a guy that does my plumbing for me. He would have been in school with me. His dad was doing all my plumbing for me.
Okay.
And, like, they're plumbers, like, it's the dad's plumbing 45 years. You know, like,
so
they run
trust that,
you know, they run a proper plumbing business.
Yeah.
The rain.
Jeez.
It's
gonna be fun. It's alright.
And then, like, sometimes you might test the waters with someone. Like, you might just have something small on and you can say, like, okay, listen, go on in and do that and see how they go.
Yeah.
But then there's other times you do take a gamble. Like, I remember we had to tile a shower room in a house and the tiler I had COVID. Tiler I used had COVID.
Oh, shit.
But he only got, like, he was due to tile the bathroom on Thursday and he realised on Tuesday, I have COVID. I was like, what do you do? Because the family needed to move in. There was only one shower room in the house. So I just put a call into someone and he says, try John. I said, who's John? So in fairness, John sent 2 lads down.
Okay, yeah.
They did the job.
Done a good job.
But like that day, the stomach is a bit unsteady. Like, how's this going to look?
Oh,
in fairness, it was immaculate.
Okay, grand.
Do you know? So sometimes you just have to tap into other people and say, look, do you know anyone who's good? And in fairness, the lads that I do use, like, they're great lads because they know how I work. So they know, no, like, I actually like him because, or they'd say to you, no, do you know what I do? I know Connor for argument's sake, but no, he's a bit of a nightmare because, or he's great because, so I'd actually favour Shay over Connor or Connor over Shay for whatever reason, you know. Things, So there can be a little bit of that and a little bit of referral in that sense. But no, it's difficult. But I think, like, if you're meeting someone, right, you want them to turn up to meet you.
Yeah.
You want someone who can, in my case anyway, follow a set of drawings or read a set of drawings. That's really important. Someone that's going to give you a quotation, like a proper quotation, so you know what's what, and that they're willing to go through the quotation with you. So if you have a couple of questions, they're not kind of like getting in a flap because you have a couple of questions about their quotation.
Yeah.
and someone who's just willing to give you a little bit of time to actually walk the job on site and figure out a couple of things, and someone who brings value to the table. So there's a few, like, there's one or two people I was dealing with last year, and they're grand, but they don't really bring any value to the table.
Okay.
As in, they kind of know what they're doing, but they don't really know what they're doing, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And in that situation, like, they don't work for me, because when I say they don't work for me, I mean,
don't get the job, maybe.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me, maybe, is a better way of putting that. Because that's why I'm getting them in. I'm getting someone in who's a specialist at doing something.
Yeah.
And I need them to be able to produce the goods. So if they're coming in to do something, I don't want to have to start micromanaging them over things that they should know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay. You want to come in, check, this is the job, this is what I need done.
Yeah.
And now checking it's done.
Yeah.
Don't really care how you do it once you do it well.
Yeah, once it's done properly, yeah. So, like, I was dealing with one company, and there's a compliance piece involved with what they want. Like, there's regulations and stuff in relation to, I won't mention any names.
Yeah.
And anytime I ask the question about something, oh, well, I'm non-technical, I wouldn't know the answer to that. And then the person they send out, great worker, couldn't fault him. And I really wholeheartedly don't mean this in any disrespectful sense, he just wouldn't have great English. So you have one person who's on the phone, who's non-technical, and the other person who's a great grafter, couldn't fault him, but his English wouldn't be the best. So if you're trying to talk with something over the phone, it is difficult. You'd have to talk to him face-to-face. Talk to him face-to-face, no problems. But that makes my job difficult then.
Yeah. Because
I kind of feel like I'm jumping in and resolving a problem on something that's very easy that they should be able to do in-house. Okay. You know?
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
So in that situation, so people like that don't work well with me. I need to be able to delegate and know that that person is looking after that job. Sometimes people come from referrals. Sometimes they're people that are known to me. And then sometimes you do get caught out when you just have to take a chance. And that makes me sound like not a chancer, but sometimes you do just have to take that chance and say, well, okay, let's give this a go, you know?
Yeah.
But generally, you know, like, you kind of know by the way someone walks into a building whether they're
okay. Yeah, okay.
You would. And maybe that's just because I've been around the block and I've been burnt once or twice. Yeah. But you kind of do. Whereas if you get someone who's rushing and racing, everything's on their terms, they don't have 5 minutes for you, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
If they haven't even started the project. What are they going to like? What are they actually going to be like when they're on the ground, you know?
Yeah. No, it's similar because I can normally tell sometimes within like 5 minutes or something if someone's going to get a job.
Yeah.
And I know whether it's like makes sense to push it through, like, you know, to the next round or whatever. Yeah. So you can't tell that, but like just now you can tell by how they answer the phone, their response to the questions or whatever. Yeah. Whereas if they're dodging, I call it dodging bullets. It's like their chances are not going to do a good job for you and not going to last long in the job. If
that's the trouble. Yeah, you do get a feeling, you know. You just by the way someone's talking. So yeah, but it's like the building game is a funny one because if you have someone that tiles a shower room, like that example, and they don't do a good job, like what are you doing? You're taking tiles off walls. Putting tiles back on.
You have to fix that then, right?
All of a sudden that becomes a big cost. And luckily enough, I haven't really been in those situations, thankfully. Like, I've never really been in, like, touch wood.
But you've obviously, like, got a really well set out process now that over the years that you've developed that, it's kind of running that way for you, right?
Yeah. I suppose, though, as well, it boils down to growing up around it as well. You kind of know the difference between good and bad, you know? Because I grew up in it, I know the difference between good and bad, you know? And my dad was even just chatting about something. Good long story short, my dad's well retired. He's retired 10 years, but my auntie got a little job done in her house and he just offered to paint her kitchen for her. Got long story short, you know, and he went up and did it and he was just chatting about something and he was just kind of saying, like, he said, things have changed so much now in life. He said, like, back in his time, which is years ago, admittedly, and he's not being one of those, like, back in my day, it was better. But he just makes the point, like, and it comes back to what I was saying about the estimating piece and someone having progressed up through the ranks and learning that over the years. Like, he's kind of like, he used to start at the bottom and learn each task. And there was like a kind of like structure or a process to the way you learned those tasks. Whereas now people don't learn those things. Do you know that kind of way?
Yeah,
and I do think he's right, you know. So it's just finding people who, you know, have been through it and have been at something. Like Dean, the plumber I mentioned, like he's plumbing since he's 16. Like, you know, he's a plumber. Like,
yeah.
You know, like he's not someone who decided to give it a go at 32 and he's telling you he does. Yeah, but also then there's other things that you need to do. Like if someone's telling you they're RGI registered, like you have to check that they're actually RGI registered.
Yeah, well that'd be massive, right? If you got caught out on that.
Yeah, or if someone's saying, oh yeah, safe electric, like what's your safe electric number? You know, like little things like that, like they are important things to check. And even like if someone's doing something and like you want insurance off them and bits and bobs like that, like they're all standard things. And if someone's protesting to that, But that's a red flag as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes some of those little niggly things, they might seem a bit petty, or like it's like you're kind of becoming a bit of a jobs work, asking someone for their insurance or a tax clearance cert or their RGI number. But that does just kind of help you figure out, is this person actually who they claim to be? And then you develop a relationship with that person, and you know, like, they're good for it, and you know how they work. And the nice thing about dealing with someone regularly, and not only on every third job, is that you know how they work. You know, maybe what way you need to talk to them, or how they're going to respond to something, or what way they like doing things, or, you know, everyone has their quirks. So you know then what those quirks are, and you can manage those quirks accordingly. And, you know, with some people you have to butter them up a bit and have to crack with them, and they enjoy that. Other people just want to be left alone.
Okay.
Do you know? So you just, and I think actually, to be fair, I think I'm a good man manager in that sense. Do you know?
Yeah. Okay.
Like, I can figure that out. Like, I'm kind of streetwise in that sense, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And that's just things you learn over the years, right? And how to kind of grasp it. But do you think that you'll expand the business, or are you happy at the size that it's at? Or do you only take on a certain number of projects at one time? Or is it as many as you can get?
I was only chatting to someone about this last night. I'm trying to convince a mentor to work with me.
Okay.
So, had a chat with him a couple of weeks ago. And he's in the let's just say he's in the aviation world. I don't say anymore. It's not Michael O'Leary. And some people are thinking, how does he know Michael O'Leary? It's not Michael O'Leary, but it's someone else who is a heavy hitter in the aviation space.
Right.
And I had a call with him a couple of weeks ago, and then he said, I kind of kept at him then, you know. So he said, look, give me a call on Thursday. What time suits you? I said, how does 5? Perfect. So I rang him yesterday. He goes, in fairness to you, he says, you've been really trying, you know, you've been pushing this sort of thing. So I had a call with him yesterday, and it's funny you asked me that question, because I was kind of saying to him, like, you can go from having 1 project to having 3 to having 10 to having 2 to having 1 to having 7, and it's like, it's up and down. And he said, like, that's just the nature of some businesses. He said, like, you just have to acknowledge that some businesses are like, have a cycle. And he said, if you're doing work in schools, it's only natural June, July and August are going to be a lot busier, and even into September, because a lot of your work is then. And he said, do you know what, like, that's okay if it's working for you. Like, that is okay. So, like, and that's kind of the way things are at the minute, like, in the sense that we've 1 project on right now. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to have 3 projects on. And I'd say then come June, we'll have about 10 projects on.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how September time will look right now, but that's how it will be. Do you want to grow the business? Yeah, so I took on a new lady during the week to work in the office for me.
Class.
I'm hoping to take on a project manager. Not that I'm hoping to, I will take on a project manager. I just need to go through the recruitment process now.
What are you looking for in a project manager?
Someone who has on the ground experience but has the smarts then to get a project over the line, and someone who can take the responsibility of a project on board, and who isn't going to be ringing me every 5 minutes trying to put out fires and fix their problems.
Right.
So someone who's a problem solver and who can bring people with them, and who can literally take the project from the start to the end.
And do they have to have experience in the restoration space, or in commercial or residential, or
preferably if they had a little bit of a mix, so they'd have a bit of a better understanding of what goes on in both worlds? Because the residential stuff, like, when I first started doing the residential stuff, I thought to myself, like, is this me? Like, this is mental.
Yeah.
And then we were flat out doing the commercial stuff, and I was like, no, it's not you. Like, there's no, the residential space is just the Wild West in comparison, you know.
Yeah.
But ideally someone that just has a range of experience and just a few years, like, experience in a similar role, and they kind of have a bit of fire in their belly, and they want to grow a bit of a team for me and develop out the team of subcontractors and suppliers that we use, and someone who has that bit of intuition to know, okay, well, they're good or they're bad, or we'll use them on this project but we won't use them on the next project because that won't suit their skill set, but we'll use them on the other project in 2 months' time because they'll be great at doing that particular project, you know?
Yeah.
So someone who's able to review our supply chain strategically in that sense, someone who's able to, you know, deliver on deadlines, able to communicate and just keep track of things, like if there are bits of extras and stuff like that. So it's all that's kind of transparent, and it's not like you get to the end of the job and all of a sudden you have to pay out an extra 5 or 50 grand to people. Right. And you're kind of wondering, well, where's that going to come from, you know, because it wasn't factored in during the project. So all that sort of stuff. So that's exciting. So I'll hopefully, I was due to meet someone. I don't know what the story is there. So we'll see what happens with that particular.
Is it a case where you already kind of know who you want to hire and you kind of have them headhunted, or you've kind of dropped?
Not really.
No. It's just kind of waiting to see if the right person kind of comes along.
Yeah, I'll have to put an ad up on Indeed. I haven't done that. I did put something up in my houses to restore just to see if there was much of an interest. And 2 people did contact me and to meet one of them. So let's just see how that goes.
Yeah.
And then
What kind of systems is a project manager using, or is it just all done on Excel?
we mainly use Excel for an awful lot of stuff. There is Procore, Pro. I hope I'm pronouncing that probably Procore, and it's a kind of construction management tool, if you like.
Right, okay.
And I think if a PM starts and they want to implement something like that, great, let's do it.
Yeah, streamline things.
Just for now, I kind of have the bandwidth to do so much, and for me to go and spend my time trying to figure out Procore, I'm just quite time poor, to be honest. So trying to do that, it can be a challenge, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Would you go back to the UK then as well, doing a bit of work, or just keep it in Ireland?
I was actually having a chat with someone about that here in the week. Yeah, I'd love to do a bit in England. Yeah. London might be calling.
Oh really? Yeah. Come back. Jesus. Okay, you could end up then in France and everything.
No, not France.
No,
But I would.
It's not a big. What's it? The chateaus, is it? They're
Yeah.
like on pretty cheap, and people are doing them.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that is
There
true.
could be some money on that, no, for the big hotel chains.
Yeah. Oh, I have a few good contacts in London.
Okay.
One very good contact in particular. So I don't know. Look, maybe not.
It's on the cards, right?
Well, it mightn't be for 2 years, but I'd be open to it. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen, I won't be too upset.
Do you want
but
that like slow and steady growth over time, or
Yeah.
would you rather just skyrocket straight
I
away?
think you're better off slow and steady.
Right.
I think slow and steady wins the race. If you look at a lot of the companies that have set up and they've exploded, a lot of them don't even exist now,
Yeah.
particularly in construction.
Yeah. I seen a thing the other day. Stay small enough, long enough, and you'll be big enough someday. Like.
That's it's having like what I was chatting to your man about on the phone. He's like, think of it like a house. You have to have a really, really good foundation. So you have to have certain rules that are non-negotiable for your business.
Yeah.
And then you need to build from there. And like his point was, be comfortable doing less, but do less really well.
Okay.
Do you know?
Yeah.
And just be happy with that. Don't try, like every business owner is guilty of trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And then just try and put a little bit of a path on it. And if you're going to do one thing, become brilliant at that thing. And then add something else, and then add something else. But you don't have to add all 3 or 5 or 10 things tomorrow.
Yeah, just over time, slow and steady.
Over time, yeah.
Yeah. Let's say I'm a young lad leaving school.
Yeah.
And thinking about being a QS.
Yeah.
Would you recommend it? And then what advice would you give me?
Depends on your personality.
Okay.
It suits some people, and you can see it in some people. Funnily enough, you mentioned the army to me off screen or off set, or I don't know what term do you use for that.
Yeah.
And
Before
he was in the army band.
Right.
And he came to me, he says, think of becoming a QS. So you'd make a great QS.
Just because he has the music background, you kind of like him?
No, because he's straight shooter.
Okay.
And he's consistent, and he's quite methodical, and like he's diligent is the word I'd use.
Yeah.
So he'd kind of have each of those parts, and he'd have no issue in having a really difficult conversation with somebody. But at the same time, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, so that's he can handle it.
Yeah, perfect.
Not losing the
He
head.
works for the NTA, I think it is now,
Right.
and perfect person to do the job. But if he was someone that, let's just say,
Is he a QS at the moment?
yeah, he's working for. I think it's I think he's with the NTA anyway, the National Transport Authority is a QS.
Right.
That was the last I heard. I haven't spoken to him in a while. Perfect candidate. Those other people then, like, I won't say if you're a bit soft, but if you're a bit on the softer side, it mightn't suit you, because you do just need to be able to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, you need to be a bit of a bollocks.
Yeah, and you can have you know you do have difficult conversations, at times, and you do have to be able to put. I won't say put it up to someone, sounds quite aggressive, but just
Put the foot down.
you do have to, put the foot down, yeah. So he'd make a perfect candidate. So you'd kind of get that. Someone else came to me and said, thinking of becoming a QS. I said, not a chance. Not for you.
Okay.
Become a primary school teacher. It would suit you down to the ground. Or they didn't listen to me, but I think they would have made a good primary school teacher.
Okay.
Just because of the way they are, to cut a long story short. They didn't do that, though. But look, I wouldn't be surprised in a few years' time if they actually ended up doing that. To be honest with you. Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. Grant. If anyone wants to find you, where can they find you?
Houses to Restore is the easiest place on Instagram.
Nice. Are you responsive yourself, or do you have someone managing it for you?
No, I look after that page myself, yeah.
Okay, Grant.
Yeah.
And that's where they can contact you then.
That's
Do
where
you
they can
do you have a
contact
lot of business come through your Instagram?
Yeah, all the residential stuff would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a website then as well?
It will houses to restore.ie for that, yeah.
Store.ie.
Yeah.
Do you have any other websites?
Yeah, we are Renew for the commercial stuff.
We are Renew.
Yeah.
Okay, grand.
So Renew is like the contracting side of the business, the contracting arm, if you like, and then houses to restore, I suppose, like it's like a conduit, I suppose, in the sense that it brings in some leads. But I suppose the purpose of houses to restore to begin with wasn't to bring in leads, but it has turned into that over time. Yeah.
That's kind of the pivot.
Yeah, it's pivoted into that. Yeah. So yeah, so there's two. Yeah.
Class. Is that anything else? Or
No, that's all.
Grant, that's
Thanks
a
for
wrap.
having
Thanks
me,
very much. That was a great conversation. Loads of information for me.
That was Shay Lally from Houses to Restore. You can follow Shay's journey on Houses to Restore on Instagram. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with someone who you think would get value from the podcast. And if you could subscribe or follow the podcast, that'd be great. Thanks for listening. Until the next time.